Hello and welcome to another episode of the Axel Blaze Productions podcast. My name is Jordan, aka Axel Blaze, and we've got a very special edition of the podcast today. If you're watching this through YouTube, you are seeing a video presentation. If you're watching this or listening to this on any of the podcasting platforms, it's audio as usual. So if you want to spice things up and have some video in your life of a podcast for first time in a while, go on over to YouTube, Axel Blaze Productions. But other than that, I'm gonna get that introduction out of the way. We are joined once again by my awesome girlfriend Nicole, aka pastelewe.
Hello.
In her spooky getup, her Junji Ito getup, with her head balloon dress.
Yes.
Fantastic. And her spooky eyes.
Favorite dress.
Yes. And as obvious by now, by the books in a row, the dress, everything spooky going on, today we are talking about Junji Ito as we round out Spooktober 2020. Hoping this is the most interesting of the podcast so far. I know it will be, just because for this subject matter, I am not the expert. Nicole is the expert. She is the Junji Ito master. And in today's podcast, we'll be discussing some of the main books, some of the short stories that Junji Ito has done, his book on his cats, just everything Junji Ito. So sit back, relax. Well, relax a little bit, because there's going to be some spooky, scary, and sometimes grotesque spoilers ahead. So you've been warned. So for now, this is Axel Blaze Productions, Spooktober 2020, the Junji Ito episode. So, Nicole, how did you get into Junji Ito?
It is actually pretty funny. So, when I was in high school, that was where we moved to a house where we actually had stable internet. So
Stable internet.
Stable internet. I went ham on anime and manga, reading everything. So I actually discovered Junji Ito the same time that I discovered Faku, for those of you that know that. So just
that's
intermingled
horror and hentai. Back when Faku was free and not a subscription service.
Amazing. It's amazing. God, I don't know. So that was a time in my life, delving into, we're going to put Faku aside, but delving into what manga really, can hold, what different artists, different genres, everything that you don't see necessarily in animation and other visual forms of media. So it's been about, was that 12 years since I got into all that, so yeah, been a long time.
Mm-hmm. What was it that drew you into Junji Ito?
I really like his style, the way that he uses just black and white, his grayscale, the depth that he's able to get, and how grotesque things are. Because normal things that you find on Kiss Manga or other sites,
Kiss Manga, rest in peace.
Rest in peace. Other just regular manga sites, you don't get that kind of raw or explicit things, that Junji Ito can produce. So it was very nightmare-inducing, and he just has a style. It's very reminiscent of, obviously he debuted in the 80s, so it's very old school anime style, the way that the characters are drawn, and it's not super generic. The art style, aside from the super grotesque imagery, all of his characters, even though they appear to be simple, they're all different. He never copies a character style, even if somebody looks similar. If you look and compare, one has a little bit of a different jawline or just like a different wrinkle somewhere. There's always a difference.
Even with Tomie,
Yes.
which has a recurring character, has differences each time. So yeah, I definitely agree. As someone that's only dabbled, so for those that know me, I'm someone that I don't necessarily like horror movies. You know this. But I have the curiosity of a cat. And if I watch a horror movie, then I'm just stuck. I have to watch it. I have to watch it to completion. It's obnoxious, and I don't necessarily like it. There are some horror movies I can handle, some that I can't. Horror manga has always kind of been the difference for me, and I've read some crazy stuff. I mean, obviously, anyone that saw the last 2 episodes of the podcast with Libidors and Gantz, those are very big horror things. Gantz more so than Libidors. I'll put that out there.
Terror for Mars.
But I've also, I've watched and read Terror for Mars, and I've dabbled in other stuff over the years. Tokyo Ghoul's another one, more mainstream. What was different about Junji Ito, for me at least, was the fact that he's a master of the anticipation, the page flip. The fact, and that's, you get that more so with the book than you do online. And that's something that I appreciate with having all of these, is that that there's a build-up coming, but then you turn the page and then you see, that twist, the grotesque, sometimes double page pictures, and it's insane. The amount of detail that he puts into these different things, and it's different depending on how he's doing it, whether a monster or something is just covered in hair, or it's a slimy monster, or there's just scary shapes to the face and whatnot. It's different each time, and I appreciate it. On top of that, I also there's a dark humor aspect obviously to Junji Ito.
Absolutely.
Where it's just a lot of it's absurd. Yes, a lot of his stories are incredibly scary, but then there are ones that are just this shouldn't work as a horror thing, but it does, and I'm laughing my ass off because of it. Don't get me wrong, the balloon head, short story is scary in and of itself with the concept, but it's also really silly and funny that, these people are getting noosed by balloons of their own heads and whatnot. And there are other ones too that are just really off the walls, but his style is so great with it. It's also fantastic the fact that he's been able to cover other people's work in his own style and kind of make it his own, which is something I also definitely appreciate. And I kind of wanted to know, the fact that you mentioned, he started out, in the 80s.
Yes.
In a way, Junji Ito's having a resurgence, similar to how JoJo did. Because JoJo didn't get, an official anime. Yes, it had the OVAs, but it didn't have an official animation until, 20, 25 years after the manga first came out. And it's been in the more recent years that the Junji Ito books have all of a sudden started to be published.
Right.
Not to mention it's all over Hot Topic now.
Yes.
In the anime section you'll see Junji Ito stuff everywhere. But it's had that resurgence now, and I'm glad that he's finally getting the recognition in the West that he definitely deserves. So yeah, that was kind of my thoughts on it. And I didn't get into Junji Ito until more recently, but I definitely have appreciation for it myself. So, that being said, did you want to cover some of the main books first, or did you want to cover some of the short stories first?
We can do the main stuff first. I think first and foremost, what we need to get out of the way is Tomie. That's the biggest collection.
Yes, it is. It is the big one.
Wonderful. And just a little bit of backstory on this, or backstory on Junji Ito himself. before he debuted as a manga artist, which he did horror, but he also did gag manga, just kind of as a side thing. Before he debuted and
got serialized?
I can't think of the word. Submitted, that word. Submitted his first works into this publishing contest. He was actually a dental technician back in the 80s, early 80s. So similar to, the role of a hygienist, but he would also be working on implants and casting things in a dental office. So it wasn't until 1987 when he submitted the first works, which were the beginnings of Tomie, to Ume's, or Kazuo Ume's novel competition. He is a well-renowned horror manga artist, and he was actually the inspiration for Junji Ito. Growing up, he just loved him. So when he submitted his first, workings for Tomie, he actually won first place, and he was praised by his childhood idol, and he was the one that encouraged him to write the rest of Tomie. They've actually worked together a couple times over the years as well.
It's interesting to note, too, that, Tomie didn't necessarily start out as a collection, per se, or, a serialization of Tomie's stories. And I didn't find that out until going into Shiver, because they had one of the Tomie chapters in the book, and I read that, the Painter, and it said that, it wasn't until he did the Painter that it was kind of this is now the series, for Tomie. Yes, he, had her in, various stories, I guess, up to that point, but they weren't necessarily, oh, this is going to be a connected plot line. It was more so just, I'm bringing back Tomie every now and then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I really enjoy Tomie. That was, it's something that's probably in my top 3. But just...
Top 3 manga, period, or just top 3?
Top 3 Junji Ito.
Okay.
I mean, Junji Ito, just as everything on this table is in my top 3. So, but with Tomie, it's not just the recurrence of a singular person. I mean, she's otherworldly. She's this disease that keeps coming back, and in the way that everything connects together, all these different people, you can read a short story in the beginning of this, and then it's not until the middle or towards the end where that same person will come back in, or, some character is related to another person, and, it's, everything's kind of revolving, not just around Tomie, but around this same little community of affected people, and it's just a really interesting concept.
Mm-hmm. I would say between Uzumaki, Tomie, and Gyo, Tomie is my number 2. Mm-hmm. Compared to Gyo is my number 3, and Uzumaki is definitely my number 1. More so because, I guess for me, I kind of wanted to delve more into Tomie's origins, but that never at least happened in the confines of the book. Mm-hmm. But compared to some of the other stories and whatnot, it's interesting. Well, it always kind of comes back to whoever is infatuated with Tomie tries to kill Tomie, and more often than not they do. Mm-hmm. But she revives. She she's essentially a planarian. Mm-hmm. When you think about it, because she divides and she regrows into multiple copies of Tomie. Not that they're working together, which is another interesting thing. The copies of Tomie are very self-centered, and they don't want the other versions of Tomie to be around, mm-hmm. Which I think is very interesting. But it's nice to see that the concept is able to be, and this is also why I love Uzumaki, is that they're able to reuse a concept but still make it different every time in order to make it interesting and want you to come back again and again and again. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I definitely agree. Tomie is fantastic, and I believe I think they made a movie of it.
Yes, they did.
So definitely on the watch list at some point. And knowing that knowing that they don't have to be CGI heavy, I'm kind of I'm less apprehensive about it, knowing that okay, it's just kind of like a slasher kind of thing that they can do. So yeah. I think that let's end on Uzumaki. Let's go to Gyo next then. So there are two common, at least on the internet I've found, there are two common memes that you find with Junji Ito. And funny enough, both of them are in the Gyo book, because you've got the shark bursting through a door, and then there are two shorts at the end, and one of them is the holes in the cliffside, and then it's this is my hole, this was made for me. So if you're looking for the memes, Gyo has both of them.
Land shark.
Yes, so this guy... Gyo is so weird. It's so so with Gyo, it starts out with this couple, they're fishing on a boat, and the girlfriend is really susceptible to smell and whatnot, and they make it back to land, but something reeks of death, and they're trying to figure out what it is, and all of a sudden they see a rotting fish with legs in the corner of the room, and everything starts to spiral from there, as all of a sudden other creatures from the sea, including sharks, and at one point a whale, all start skittering onto land on four legs, as the story goes on, and we find out that what we think is just sea creatures growing legs and moving the land is all of a sudden just something darker and more twisted, and you think you know what's happening, but then they start throwing more curveballs, and it also part of the reason why Gyo is number 3 for me is just it gets gross.
It does.
It gets very gross, but it's still interesting at the same time. It's also the one where it's just kind of got the weird humor, because at one point in time there's just a random fucking circus that's exploiting the situation, and just weird.
Yeah, you gotta throw some stuff in there once in a while. Just break it up. There's some variety. Yeah.
Now, how did you feel about this one, especially since you have your fear of sharks and water? How did you handle the sharks on land?
It was... I was able to get over it. I mean, it's a lot easier reading something rather than watching something in terms of that, the fear of being in open water and there's sharks and so I'll never go in the ocean ever again. It's a lot easier just to read it and knowing that it's Junji Ito and it's over the top. It was fine. But as the book as a whole, I mean, I appreciated it. My love of, I don't know, just dead things in general, but dead being not necessarily possessed, but just the over-the-top ridiculousness of nature and things that you can't control. All of a sudden, there's all these different aspects going on. I don't want to spoil too much for those that haven't read it, but it's definitely crazy.
Yeah. And again, very gross.
It gets gross.
This is one where it's just not that you're obvious... With any one of these, you're only visually seeing it, but the fact that they bring up smell a lot, and a very important thing factors into it. Yeah. But just know that the sharks on land is only the beginning of the horrors that wait in Gyo. And yeah, this is another one. This is of the 3 series. This is the shortest of the 3, because this one was definitely more so just shorter chapters. It's around the same amount of chapters. It's just that the chapters in Gyo are a lot shorter. But I definitely want to talk about, at least quickly, the fault, or Amagazi fault, or whatever the name of the holes in the wall one is. Just the fact that it's such a meme, like this hole in the wall is meant for me, and all these people are suddenly just like walking up to it and the going into the walls and never coming out, and the twist at the end is just kind of like, oh. It's definitely meme worthy. It's a good short story. The twist at the end is definitely the scariest part of it. I mean, other than just going into a wall and never wanting to come out. More so, you can't get out because you can only keep going forward. But despite being a meme, it still has a interesting ending.
Yes.
It's not necessarily one of my favorites of the short stories because there are other ones that I find more interesting, but
it's nice because it's a meme.
It is. I agree.
I liked it.
That being said, that brings us then to Uzumaki, which was definitely... Uzumaki was also I splurge read Junji... despite the fact that I said that Junji Ito was going to be the finale episode of the month, I didn't start reading these books until a couple days ago, and Uzumaki was the first one that I read, and I sped read through most of these. And just, dear God. So, for those that don't know with Uzumaki, I'll let you explain it a little bit more, because I explained the last one.
I'm sure people, especially if you shop at Hot Topic or, Facebook hears your conversations and you get Hot Topic things popping up all the time. So if you've ever seen comic drawings of the spirals, the girl with the spiral in her head and her eyeballs just kind of sitting there, that's from Uzumaki. Uzumaki literally translates to Whirlpool, which, those of you that know Naruto, that's his last name, and that's why the Rasengan and all of the Rasengan
and the spiral symbol.
The spiral symbol, and then everything around it was just all about spinning, and so that's what that means. So this whole book was relating to different spirals and different applications of the spirals in different ways. So whether that meant, physical body horror with the spirals, or just playing into what's that called, trypophobia or something, the fear of small holes and little spirals, played into that as well. So since this one's your favorite, what's your favorite little excerpt from it?
Jeez, oh my gosh. I don't know if I can necessarily pick like a favorite per se. I will. One of the things that I love but also hate about Uzumaki is the fact that it follows the two main characters, this girl and her boyfriend, not boyfriend, as people in the town keep dying of various spiral related things. Starting with the boyfriend's dad, who becomes obsessed with spirals. And then kills himself in the shape of a spiral, and then as he's cremated, his ashes go up into the air and create a spiral in the sky. And in all honesty, I think that right there is part of what made it my favorite right away. The fact that this man essentially, you think he cursed the town into this whole spiral nonsense. Although when you get towards the end of it, you realize that there's way more to this town and the spirals than you kind of knew in the first place. But I love, and this one is just kind of a silly thing, the one chapter where the female main character, her hair grows too long and her hair starts spiraling. I believe the chapter is called Medusa. And one of her friends is just I'm so jealous of you, I want all of this attention, because the spirals are literally hypnotizing people. And then her hair grows super long And it turns out, like, the hair, it gets ridiculous. Like, their hair is, like, super big and windy and spirally, and, like, the boyfriend manages to cut his girlfriend's hair, but the other girl is just like, I've won, ha 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 ha. And as she's wandering through town and, like, people are following her, like, the hair is just sucking the life out of her, and she dies attached to a telephone pole. Like, it's... That, again, is the aspect of how, like, Junji Ito can be so scary, and there are several parts to Uzumaki that are just creepy as hell, because of how they apply the spirals, especially with a particular transformation that starts affecting certain people of the town, although there are various transformations that are affecting everyone that are spiral related or twisting or whatnot, and but the fact that there was just this really goofy chapter of how, like, these girls had, like, spiral hair and, like, they were hypnotizing people with it. I thought that was really funny. But, like, the fact that, like, with Uzumaki, there is no happy ending. There's never, like, a happy ending with Uzumaki. And, like, that's something that, like, with a lot of the Junji Ito stuff, sometimes, or more often than not, there's no happy ending. Sometimes there's an ambiguous ending, and very rarely there's, like, a good ending. Yeah. And with Uzumaki, there's just none of that. There's none. As you're just spiraling towards death and the doom that belies everyone that lives in this town and anyone that tries to come to the town. And for the record, no one can escape. No one can escape the death spiral happening, and it's just so good. Of the collected works, that one is definitely my favorite. And for those that might not know, Uzumaki is being adapted into an anime with the thanks of Toonami. And I think that is going to be awesome, especially because they're doing it in black and white, which is, I think, how it's going to work well. Because unfortunately, they tried... I don't even know if tried is the right answer, but they adapted some of the short stories of the Junji Ito collection into an anime, and it was garbage. It was bad. It was very bad. Like, it was, like, literally the lowest effort they could put into it, just to have his name slapped on there, and just... Yeah. No. Like, because that's the thing, is that, like, again... Because of how there's all the detail with the Junji Ito stuff, it just didn't have it.
Yeah. It was very disappointing. I mean, I still watched a lot of it. But, yeah, compared to what you can actually see and experience in the books, it just didn't hold up whatsoever to the books. But... watch it, don't watch it, it's fine.
At the very least, wait out for Uzumaki, because that should be very good. Very good.
And actually told me it was a live-action movie, so that was okay.
True.
That didn't get messed up.
Although, again, it's harder to mess that up when there's... Tomie is scary, but it's also on the simpler side, which is not a bad thing. Like, simple is good when it's done well, and Tomie does it well.
Right.
So I would hope they would be able to do it right in a movie. But I digress. I guess before we get into short stories then, because you mentioned this, No Longer Human and Frankenstein are both Junji Ito adaptations of stories rather than like original stuff or like short stories.
Well, Frankenstein is his adaptation, yet it literally takes the story of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and he just Junji Ito-fies it, adding some things here and there, but you know, that it was great. It was very well done. And last year, 2019, he actually won an Eisner Award for that. That's where he put a little bit more of his twist on it, whereas No Longer Human, that is just straight. He just illustrated the story of this author. I actually can't remember who wrote this. I can't read it with my contacts.
There's scary contacts. The original novel by Osamu Dazai.
Yes. So that book, I believe, came out... Oh, jeez. When did that come out?
Now you're talking about in Japan or you in the U.S.?
I'm talking about the actual novel.
By Osamu Dazai?
Yes, I believe that was released in the 80s as well. It's been out for a while. But it was not that long ago that... was it the 80s? Or am I thinking of something else?
Oh, he completed it in 1948 because Osamu Dazai was born in 1909.
All right, I was thinking of something else. So,
and he died by suicide at the age of 38.
of course.
Spooky.
Well, that's how all great artists die. Yeah. That was actually my second guess, was the 40s. So, it was just a couple of years ago that Junji Ito, illustrated this whole novel. So, long story short, you follow this, man. Throughout his childhood, he is the son of a very wealthy politician, and he's supposed to keep up certain standards, and, he grows up in very young. He was exposed to sexual abuse and different things, and so you see, just certain points where his mental state starts to shift. And I think that it was fantastic that Junji Ito was chosen to illustrate this, because he's great at that. He's great at illustrating intense emotion and just a series of mental downfalls. And this whole book just goes through his whole life. Unfortunately, the main character does die somewhat young. Spoiler, but just going through his whole life of all these different hardships and sex and drugs and alcohol, and in the back of his mind he's always telling himself that he's gotta smile and make people laugh, because that's all that he's good at. So it was very, very interesting.
Gotcha. I definitely look forward to reading it. I haven't. These are the only two of the books that we have here that I haven't gotten to read yet. So I definitely wanted to cover the stuff that was his original work and the short story stuff, and have not been disappointed by those, and I have no doubt in my mind that I won't be disappointed with these. So definitely looking forward to it. And I know he's adapted, I believe, other things in the past. Viz Media is being like. They're gradually releasing more and more Junji Ito stuff as time goes on. I think they're at 3 or 4 Junji Ito releases in a year at this point. Which, speaking of, the next one to be released is Ramina, which is another one that's similar to these 3, I believe, in that it's a collection of stories revolving around a demon star planet thingy, so looking forward to that. But so then that brings us to talking about the different short stories.
Yes.
And there are a lot of them.
Yes.
There are a lot more out there that haven't been put into these books yet, or at least ones that have been brought over to the US, especially since I know, not that I've watched it, but I know there are several short stories that were adapted into the Junji Ito collection anime that haven't been collected necessarily in book collection form yet. They of the ones that are in the books before us, there are a lot of winners among these, and they range so much from like topic to topic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just like to put it out there that Shiver, this entire book is it's my heart. It's my everything. Every story in this, it just has so many big name stories and high impact situations. It's not just a common theme. It's all across the board and just has so many different way out there concepts.
And that's the one that of the collected works has the most stories that are like body horror related.
Yes.
Because like Smashed, I know, was one that had a lot more human stuff in it.
A lot more of
Fragments of Horror was one that that was one of the few books that had a lot more like happy-ish endings.
Less people dying.
Yes, less people dying.
That's what's qualifying it as happy-ish.
Happy-ish. Venus in the Blind Spot. I don't know if there's necessarily a way to describe the collection in there, but it does have a lot of really cool color pages from various stories and whatnot that have been printed so far. So that one's very nice, and it even has several color pages in the book itself, which most of the other ones are just black and white. So that is a nice change of pace there.
Yeah. I would have to say you are right. Shiver, it has a lot of body horror. Smashed, it's a lot of kind of wrong place at the wrong time, human interaction, relation, tension, what the human person is able to do psychologically. Fragments of Horror has one of my favorites, actually, the first stories in there. The married man, where he slowly goes insane, his sleeping bag, his sleeping
his
cot.
futon.
Yes, the futon. It's slowly growing mold, and the wife doesn't know what to do, and he starts hallucinating that he's sleeping with another woman, and there's another woman in his futon, and after like a month or so, his wife comes back. She left him and she came back, and the way that he draws it, the wife peels back the futon, and it's just all stringy mold, and he's just in there. It's gross in that way. So that's more of the really abstract kind of horror things, hence, Fragments of Horror. I really enjoyed Venus in the Blind Spot, specifically the namesake story.
That was one of the interesting ones because it was like more science-y compared to some of the other ones.
Yeah, and I definitely wasn't expecting it.
No.
They're talking about UFOs, and it's this whole fan club for aliens and UFO sightings and things like that, and it turns out her father, this doctor, has been abducting these men who are infatuated with his daughter. He's abducting them, kind of playing it out as an alien abduction, but he's a surgeon, and he implants something in their brains that reflects, through their retinas, reflects something in her earrings, the daughter's earrings, so it actually makes the men not be able to see her.
If they get close to her, they're in a blind spot. Thus Venus in the Blind Spot.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool.
Yeah. And as time went on, like the guys just couldn't see her at all. And the sad thing is, like, this entire time, like, she is the head of this UFO group, and she herself is like in love with the concept of like finding aliens and whatnot. But the fact of the matter is, all these guys have just devolved into just being a fan club for her, despite the fact that like none of them can see her at this point because of her father. And that's really the sad thing, is that like she doesn't know that her father's doing this. She didn't realize that any of these guys couldn't see her because none of them were telling her this. So that one definitely had a sad ending to it in comparison. So, I mean, that being said, a lot of these have sad endings for that matter. Which is actually why one of the ones that I wanted to talk about, and I just wanted to make sure I got the name right, so I wrote it down. Gentle Goodbye from Fragments of Horror is... Gentle Goodbye is the one story in all of these short stories that isn't really horror, but sad. In Gentle Goodbye, this woman marries into this family, and she kind of finds it weird at first that, like, all of these people, like, all of the older relatives are still alive and, like, in the house. But she finds out at some point that they are translucent. They're not ghosts, but they're after images that are essentially summoned by that family. Like, whenever there's a funeral, they all gather together, and with their willpower, they summon that after image back to life, and that after image stays around for 20 years, so that the families can kind of acclimate to the fact that, like, that family member or those family members are dead, and they have a longer time to, you know, say goodbye to them. And as time goes on, we find out that, you know, like, a lot of the older people are dead, but the younger sister died when she was, like, 10 years old. And then the saddest part is that we find out that the main girl, she finds her husband cheating on her, but that's when we find out that she herself died 10 years ago from a car accident, and the husband literally begged everyone in the family to bring her back as an after image, as the only person outside of the family to get that privilege, even though this entire time she herself was worrying about her father and when he would die, and that she didn't want him to die despite the fact that she was the one that had already died. Like, so there's obviously, yes, just to that horror aspect of it, that, you know, people are dying and they're essentially ghosts that are still roaming around, but that's really the only one that's, like, just sad the entire way through. And I thought that was definitely something that needed to be touched upon, since everything else is just so horror-y.
Yeah, I definitely agree that it was, you know, stand apart from other stories in that way, where, you know, this isn't the first time that Junji Ito has had a story about, you know, family lineage and things like that, or relatives being dead and what, but this is something where it was really just a kind of a mindfuck kind of a thing. It's like, oh my god, everybody's dead, but it's, what would you do in that kind of situation? You know, there's nothing that you can do, and it's just a really solemn, okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
What were some of your favorites?
Out of everything?
Out of all the short stories, yeah.
Well, short stories, yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, the first one with the mold futon, can't remember the name of that off the top of my head. The head balloons, the head blimps that's one of my favorites. As well as the model in Shiver as well.
You liked the model?
I did. Fuji, she was amazing.
Oh my god.
So the shark woman, that's actually, she's on a t-shirt at Hot Topic as well. Just all of these super long, jagged teeth, and the fact that this whole group of, you know, young adult guys, they're trying to film a movie and stuff like that. They're looking through magazines. They're putting out flyers. They want actresses, and this one guy is haunted by this model that he sees.
Her image.
He thinks that she's so just grotesque and just not human And everybody else is like, what? Come on, like, so what? She's ugly. Like, don't be a dick. But, then
It'll be funny, man.
it'll be funny. So they hire her, and yeah, it turns out, obviously, she's not human. She didn't like the fact that she wasn't the main character, so she ate the main character. They were all out in the woods, and she lured the girl out there, and one of the guys saw her just ripping her apart. And it was the face, not just the mouth and all the teeth. She was super tall. She towered over everybody, and she had these super long arms and her
And a long
eyes.
face.
Yes, it was long, and anytime there was a scene where like they were all in the car together, she was smushed up against everybody and then just sitting there. Or her laugh was described as really deep and really just ha ha. Like, stagnant, and just everything about this person is so off-putting, but these guys are just like, come on, don't be a dick, like, we'll hire her, it's fine.
It was so crazy to me too that like she came back in another story, like in a weird like crossover, like just weird thing. The story of the boy who would curse his family, had the nails in his mouth, grew up to. Yep, he grew up to run a haunted house, and he was controlling all of his family in there because he had obtained curse power. And it turns out that he married Fuchi and had a kid with her, and just was continuing to run away from Fuchi because he was scared of her. So God, it was such a weird crossover, and I was just like, oh my God.
Yes.
Did not expect that. But.
Yes. Another one that I really liked was The House of Marionette, which was in this one as well. That one was just creepy as fuck. Obviously marionettes, puppets are really off-putting to a lot of people, but the fact, when your brother, who you haven't seen in all these years, all of a sudden you reunite with him, and he's obsessed with puppets and marionettes, he strung up himself and his whole family in his house, so they never actually touched the ground, and they never actually moved by themselves.
Other than their fingers.
And so the younger brother and the sister, were like, what?
Yeah, and it took the main character's, the girl that he liked dying to just kind of like put everything away, like end everything. Yes. And he was able to save his little sister. He wasn't able to save the love interest. And when the puppets were all ended, the fact that his older brother and his family had become puppets was in and of itself pretty scary too. So no, I appreciated that one as well. One of the other weird ones that I really liked was the Eternal Dreams one.
Yes.
So
I was gonna say about that one too.
That one is so weird. So in one of these stories, there's a girl who is she's kind of got like a neurosis thing going on where she's constantly afraid of death. And at one point she sees the figure of this guy roaming through the hospital and says that like he's like a messenger of death kind of thing. And we find out that there's this teenage boy that lives in the hospital, and every time he dreams, the time that he's in the dream is longer. Like anytime he's dreaming, like it's only like a day at a time in like the real world, but it becomes a day and a half, 2 days, a week, a month, a year, and goes on and on and on. And like
his body ages with it.
Not just ages, but like mutates. Yeah. Like that's the crazy, like he's like, one of the doctors that's observing him is like saying like he's evolving as he is sleeping, and it's absolutely insane. Like just the thought of that, like let's say that you fall asleep one day, and then like you are dreaming, but you are dreaming for 1,000 years, only to find out when you wake up that only a day has actually passed in real life. That's insane. Like it's scary too, because like the guy even says like there are some dreams that are like just scary or just hellish. Like he dreamt that like for 8 years he was cramming for exams. For like 8 years he had to go find a bathroom and couldn't find a bathroom. And like with the one girl that was freaking out in the hospital, he dreamed that he was married to her for 1,000 years. And that they found each other in the hospital, which is true. But because of that, that's what spurred on this 1,000-year dream. And
so then, after waking up and having these years-long relationships, the grief that set in as well of, to him that was real, to us it wasn't real, but just not having that around anymore. So he constantly had to be, reintroduced to all these different doctors and specialists and just have to come back to, that wasn't actually real. This is, so just the constant battle of going in between, different states of mind, and the design of that character as well. By the time it was the end of the story, he, was mutated. His head was different. His brain was huge, kind of almost like a When Mars Attacks design, but he just looked so sickly, and
then he crumbled to dust, leaving behind these brain crystal things that the doctor then experiments on the girl that was scared of dying on, and all of a sudden she is infected with the eternal dreams and starts to mutate herself, and just yeah, no, that one is definitely creepy as well.
Absolutely. One last story I'd like to touch on before maybe wrapping things up and getting to the cats.
Yes, the cats.
The first story in Venus in the Blind Spot, Billions Alone.
Yes, Billions Alone.
Billions Alone. I thought it was very similar. The story and the way that things played out, I thought it was very similar to what's going on in our country at the moment.
That's fair.
That's the connection that I made. So in the beginning of the story, first it was just a couple, and then it was a couple more people, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. These people that were turning up dying.
Bound together by fishing line in various ways.
Yeah.
And the main character is a guy who he dropped out of school 7 years ago because he couldn't handle like the crowds and whatnot. But some former classmates are organizing a school reunion along the time that they're having like the coming of age ceremony for people in the area.
Yeah. So, yeah, obviously, people started to figure out that it was people that were in groups or people that were, really close together that were going missing, and then they'd turn up dead sewn together.
And not even necessarily like immediately, like the day after.
Yeah,
like there was, because at one point, like they do have the coming of age ceremony, but like the main character and the girl that he liked go in, and all of like the 500 some people are gone. And then 3 days later they turn up in like a forest temple area, and they're all sewn together, and like the ways that like the various characters are sewn together and whatnot, like the Christmas one is like freaky. And this entire time too, like there's like the radio station will all of a sudden cut away to like the billions alone, like no one wants to die alone, and like a plane scattering like pamphlets from the air and whatnot. It's just freaky. I guess my only complaint is that the ending just kind of felt like, oh, well, I was kind of expecting more than this, but yeah, that one was definitely interesting just because of how they were able to get it all together.
I just thought, the connection, with what's going on today was, obviously, more and more people started to die, but it was just the fact that once things kind of settled in for people where you couldn't be close to other people, you couldn't be in big groups, that was really the moment where it's like, oh shit. Because even the main character, he was trying to talk to his mom, be like, hey, I'm gonna go out for a bit, and the mom is like, don't come in here, stay away. So people just started to self-isolate and isolate from everybody else, and it just turned into this big clusterfuck of people being alone, and then people ignoring everything and being in groups together, and it just all this different stuff was going on, and it was crazy.
Yep. All right. So last but not least, we gotta talk about the cats.
The cats, Jan and Moo.
Okay, so again, like, one of the things that we've touched upon several times is the fact that, like, while Junji Ito is a master of horror, he likes to throw in comedy here and there, and Jan and Moo is literally just comedy incarnate, but at the same time, like, it's telling the story of, like, his actual cats and his actual fiance, but he draws himself and his fiance, like, really scary throughout the entire thing, but it's hilarious.
Yes. I dropped it. So this, it's super funny. It's a really light read, so you can get through it really fast, but it's just his little gag thing on the side. Before him and his wife got married, they bought a house, and it starts out, he was really excited for his new house. This is the house that he bought as an adult. There's new floors, it smells nice, the nice white walls, and then his wife brings home the cat from her parents' house, and this cat, it's just got something wrong with it. Like, he actually put real photos of it in here. Its face is weird. He has a really long face, and it just...
And, like, the skull pattern on his back.
Yes.
Yep.
So that's kind of the running joke, is that it's a cursed cat.
And they adopt a baby cat as well.
Yeah.
And even, like, the cursed cat is only 1 year old when they bring him home for the first time, so...
It's just funny.
It really is.
There's little, like, kind of question and answer things in here. This was actually published in 2009 or 2010, but he had said at that point that his wife and his mom were actually the ones that helped him, or continue to help him with his editing. So, they're the ones that fill in a lot of the black spots with pen or Sharpie.
And some of them are better than he is.
Yes. And his wife made comments about how Akko's, famous striped pants in here, they don't actually exist in her wardrobe. She's like, why the fuck you drive me with these striped pants?
I don't wear striped pants. What the hell?
And she didn't like the haircut that he gave her. Just all these really silly things. And I was laughing at the the scene where Jan got sick and he was sneezing all over the place, and Junji Ito, he slipped on this cat's snot on the hardwood floor and just, like, busted his shit on the floor. And he's like, oh, this is gross. Like, it's just every day it's a constant annoyance with this cat, and
even though he actually loves them very much.
Yes,
like,
he loves all cats.
Like, he goes crazy over these cats.
Yeah, I think every cat owner can appreciate and relate to the stuff that he writes in here. At least when I had a cat, mine set itself on fire a couple times, so I can definitely relate with the hazard of an animal.
Yep. And if you do want to get any of these books for yourselves, for the most part, all the books that you see on the table here are ones that are printed by Viz Media. You can get them wherever manga is sold. We've gotten all of ours through Barnes & Noble, through either buying them on their own or buying them through sales. If Barnes & Noble ever comes back with the buy two get one free for Viz Media sales, that is your best time to get them, because most of these hardcover books are $20+. So if you can get one for free in the mix there, that's absolutely fantastic. Yonenmu is the only one that's a little weird because it's printed by Kodansha in comparison to the Viz Media ones. So that's one thing of note with that one. But otherwise, like we said, Ramina is also coming out later this year. And there's also the Junji Ito art book is also out now. We don't have it ourselves yet. We will get it. We will get it eventually. Maybe for Christmas. Probably for Christmas. But yeah, that is something that is on the horizon for us to get. But definitely looking forward to future releases that he has. Also looking forward to Uzumaki. You can bet that once we get to finally see it, there will be a video on it of how we feel and whatnot. And if we can ever get our hands on the Tomie live action movie, that's also something that we could probably toss our hat in the ring for.
Prime. Prime.
Probably.
Yeah.
Or other means. But yeah, any last parting thoughts on Junji Ito before we end things here?
He is a wonderful man, and I don't just mean that in terms of artistry. Just his personality is absolutely great.
He's genuinely a good guy.
He's very quiet and very shy. He likes cats.
He's not the type that you would think could write amazing horror like this, but he is. And it's always the ones that you don't necessarily expect that do.
Right. In case you didn't know as well, he also partners, or in the past has partnered with Creations video games. He's partnered with Guillermo del Toro as well. He's worked with him. He also had a hand in designing Silent Hill, the video game. So.
Makes sense.
What was the video game he was partnering for? There was something recent with Hideo
Kojima?
Yeah. What
That's
were they
gonna
doing?
be terrifying.
And I know. I forget what it was. It was something in the works. They had to put it on hold. Now they're back working on it. I can't remember what it is. You'll have to put it at the end of the video somewhere when we can look it up what it is, because that's going to drive me insane.
I'll try to figure it out.
Oh, damn. What is that?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
those are my thoughts on Junji Ito.
Sounds
He's
good.
amazing.
Yeah, definitely support him. He's a fantastic artist, fantastic human being. And while he will scare your pants off, he will make your heart swell with love for him. But that being said, this wraps up the fourth and final episode of Spooktober 2020. I hope you guys have enjoyed the ride. I know I have, talking about some of my favorite spooky stuff. If you haven't watched any of the other podcasts, they are on playlists on my YouTube channel under Spooktober 2020. You can find them on my podcasting platform stuff under Axel Blaze Productions. Haven't decided yet necessarily what's coming for November, but weekly releases will still be happening on Friday for the time being unless a better date comes up in the future. But otherwise, for now, I want to thank my guest and girlfriend, Nicole pastelewe, for joining me for another video, being the master and bringing me along on this horrorful but awesome ride. You can find her at pastelewe on Instagram. And eventually we'll get you doing YouTube-y stuff and whatnot in the future. But she'll be back for other podcasts and whatnot on this channel as well. So look forward to that. Otherwise, for now, my name is Jordan, a.k.a. Axel Blaze. And I've got more reading to do. And so do you.
A little bit.
Little bit.
Tiny bit.
Tiny bit. Bye-bye, everybody.